Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor from the Department of Mass Communication at UNC Pembroke. Today's guest is Mark Waid, one of the most prolific writers in comics today. Mark's work includes a celebrated run on Daredevil, Flash, Captain America, the Justice League, Kingdom Come, and the list goes on and on. He is also on the forefront of digital comics with his own online imprint, Thrillbent. Mark, welcome.
Good afternoon, Professor.
Well, let's start with your current projects. How many titles are you writing?
Oh, good Lord. Let's see. It's Daredevil, Hulk, Fox for Archie Comics, Rocketeer Spirit for IDW, Dr. Occult and Green Hornet for Dynamite, just a legendary graphic novel, and of course my own stuff at Thrillbent. I think that's everything, but and that concludes our time, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for showing up.
So, I mean, that's a lot of writing every month to do. How do you balance, that creative inspiration and a deadline?
You just, honestly, I'm like the coyote walking off the cliff in the old Warner Brothers cartoons. If I look down, I'll just plummet and fall. I didn't used to, but I keep pretty meticulous to-do lists. I try to at least get something written every day, even if it's just part of one issue of something. At least there's that sense that there's some forward movement. The hardest part is not juggling the assignments with the business end or the deadlines. The hardest part is actually sort of the gear shifting mentally in between doing something that's a little lighter and then a little darker and a little heavier and a little brighter. So it's just years of experience.
Right. I'm imagining that it's got to be difficult because, it's a creative art.
Right.
So you said that you switch gears. How far out do you plan your storylines?
What time is it now? Honestly, I don't say this because I take pride in it. I just say it because it seems to be the process that works. I have a vague idea of where I want to go from month to month on these books, on the various things I'm doing. But honestly, a lot of times I just sort of literally make it up as I go, and I'm very fond of writing cliffhangers at the end of an issue where I have not the foggiest idea what's going to happen next, or how the heroes get out of it, for two reasons. One is that I figure if I don't know, you can't guess, so we'll both be surprised. And the other is because I actually have discovered I really enjoy the sort of MacGyver aspect of taking a situation and a set of superpowers, and then seeing how one can benefit the other, and trying to work out how Batman could defeat Darkseid with just the stuff in his utility belt, or how the Flash could stop a runaway train, or that kind of thing. I actually that to me is the puzzle aspect, fun of the job.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I think you do better than just about anyone is take a character that might be thought of in one way, and you find a way to make the character fresh and make us really relate to the character. And one of the books that you're working on now, although I understand you're going to be taking it in a different direction, is Daredevil for Marvel. You've revived the character, people are talking about the book again, and it's a completely different take from that Frank Miller, very dark and gritty vibe that Marvel had been going with since the 80s. Was that a conscious choice to bring it back to the olden days of the title?
It was. Well, not so much the olden days, it's just the idea of when Marvel approached me to do the book, we both admitted this is not in my wheelhouse. I enjoy a good crime comic and I enjoy darker material, but I don't write it particularly well because I'm not by nature a cynical person, and I think it's very difficult to do cynical in a superhero milieu. So I said, well, if you let me kind of go off in my own direction and establish the tone that I'm more comfortable with, it's a big gamble, but we'll try it. And I thought it was a huge gamble because we very easily could have had readers just turning us off and going, it's not what Frank did, it's not what Brian Bendis did, it's not what Ed Brubaker did, the guy's a loser, get him out of here, But luckily the fans seemed to be with me. We hit the right approach at the right time. It certainly didn't hurt that I had this murderer's row of great artists like Paulo Rivera and Marcos Martin to work with. And of course now Chris Samnee it makes it incredibly easy to do. But like I said, it wasn't a conscious decision to turn left from where they were. Back to your question, it's more about finding the things in the character that I personally respond to, that I can relate to on some level, and then writing that, sort of discovering the things about the character that I love and shining those things up and showing you what it is I love about those characters.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I think you did, you brought back the Spot, which was seemingly a throwaway character from Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man. I think Al Milgrom created him. And you brought him back and made him one of the most interesting villains that Daredevil faced, and he had to come up with a great solution for that problem.
Thank you.
Was that something where you just remembered the character, or you just wanted to put in someone obscure?
I was just trying to find something for Daredevil to face that I haven't seen in 50 years, which is a tall order. And I like going through other people's rogues galleries. I love going through other heroes' villains lists and seeing what's there. And once I had that image in my head of how Daredevil would perceive the Spot with his radar vision, that the idea that, you know, for those of you just joining us, Daredevil has a 360-degree sort of radar vision echolocation thing going on, where solid things appear differently, obviously, than semi-solid things. And to us, the Spot looks like a guy in a white costume with black holes all over him, but in fact, those black holes are actually, you know, portals. To Daredevil, he would look like Swiss cheese. And that was what convinced me that this was a good way to go. And from there, then you sort of built these interesting visuals out of the whole fight.
And, you know, supporting characters, I'm just going to switch gears here. Supporting characters are a big part of every hero's life. And when you were writing The Flash, you really developed the family, I guess the Speed family. And in Daredevil, you sort of brought Foggy Nelson back to being, you know, sort of a lovable character that kind of got lost. He became more depressed as the years went on, and you sort of brought him back. Was there a thought you had on him when you started the book again, or taking the book on?
Just that, I honestly believe, and this is going to sound funny, but there's an element of truth to this. I honestly believe that if you're a lawyer and your name is Foggy, you either have to be really bad at what you do, or you have to be really, really good at what you do to supplant the name Foggy. So I like this idea. I got this idea in my head that Foggy was the guy who has all the book learning and all the knowledge as a court lawyer, and he's okay in court, but he's not Matt. Whereas Matt doesn't have he hasn't done all the reading. He doesn't always do his homework. He was always one of those students who sort of skated by more on charm than on skill. Not stupid by any stretch of the imagination, but Foggy's the brains and Matt's sort of the face of the operation. And once I had that sort of balance in my head of the two of them and how it worked, they just became so much fun to write. They're two of the best friends in comics, and they've been best friends for 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the other question I have for you. There's I guess a relationship that a writer and an artist have, the way they collaborate. And I was speaking to Denny O'Neil a few weeks back, and he was saying that most of his celebrated work, he never knew who the artist was going to be. He would just sort of submit the script, and Julie Schwartz would assign Neil Adams or Irv Novak to write some story. How are you able to work with the artist? I'm assuming you know who's going to be on the book at this point.
Well, with Daredevil, yes, and with Hulk, it seems to be, just through luck of the draw, it seems to be a bunch of different guys, all of whom are very good, but a lot of times with Hulk, I am doing the Denny O'Neil thing of just writing plots, writing scripts, and not really knowing who's going to realize them in graphic form. With Daredevil, it's a very close relationship. I mean, with all of the guys who work on the book, and I believe this is the philosophy that should exist in all creative work. It's a collaborative medium. It's not my script. It is my script until such time as I turn it over to the next guy in the chain, at which point it becomes our story. So Chris Somney and I talk a great deal on the phone. We do a lot of email back and forth. And the idea is that, as long as we're telling the same story, as long as we're on the same basic wavelength, he's free to interpret it however. I mean, I have suggestions, and I give him some starting points, but he's free to change the visuals however he sees fit. And he's the guy who has to work on it day in and day out and do the heavy lifting on the drawing. So I just let him go.
And when you see the pages coming in, do you have the dialogue scripted already, or is it something that you look at and see, out of an outline what would make sense in this spot or that spot, or something that you had scripted perhaps you could eliminate because the art suggested more than you would hope for?
Well, a little bit of all. I mean, actually with Chris in particular, actually with most guys, I actually do like working full script first, just because I find that it's much easier to cover all the plot holes and make sure you haven't forgotten anything as a scripter, that you haven't written yourself into a corner. But always, when the artwork comes back in, whether it's Chris's pages or layouts from a Hulk artist or whoever, you always want to go back with an eye towards, okay, how do I do it? Does this need rewriting? Does this need, can we trim this down some? Can we move the copy around a little bit so that it fits the art a little bit better? And again, I'm just not a big fan of handing over the script and just saying, okay, well, my work is done, and then I see it in print. It's not. A lot of times you'll get lucky with a creative artist who is collaborative in that sense, but a lot of times too, it just, if you're not used to working with a particular artist, I don't know, it could always stand another polish and another sort of going back over to sand over the smooth edges. Sand over the smooth edges. Sand over the rough edges. Yes.
Now you sound like me. I'm stumbling over my tongue.
I'd be a writer. Thank you.
Now, when you're working on these books, I'm assuming that you have artists that you would like to work with. Have you had a project that you've always wanted to do with a certain creator that the opportunity comes up, or that you're always looking for the opportunity to put that book together?
I mean, always. I haven't worked with Andy Kubert forever. I haven't worked with Adam Kubert forever. Carlos Pacheco is somebody I haven't worked with for years and years. These are, and John Romita Jr. actually is at the top of my list of guys I really would love to work on with at some point. And I think there's time. I'm still, hopefully I've still got another 50 years or so in me as a writer. So, that's, a lot of times it's that, I've got a guy, I've got an artist, what can we work on together? But a lot of times, especially if it's a corporate-owned comic like, a DC comic or a Marvel comic, it really is, it's ultimately the company's call to see, and they team you up with an artist, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But some of the best relationships I've gotten have been out of that sort of forced marriage that turned into a really healthy relationship.
Well, I guess that's a great point that you make, is that when you work for Marvel or DC, you're working with characters that are owned by large corporations. They're designed to make as much money as possible for these companies. And when you write a story, you might have a great idea, but they're never going to let you kill Spider-Man,
Right.
Because the next month there has to be a book that comes out. So how do you balance, I guess, writing the story that you want to tell versus the editorial mandates that, the character needs to be in this crossover, or, we need to have this costume change or something like that?
Well, I mean, you need to be flexible. You always have to remember that you're playing in somebody else's sandbox. You want to have some sense of proprietary ownership of the character, not in a real sense, but just you want to feel invested in what you're doing and feel like these are the stories you really want to tell. But honestly, anybody who gets into this medium and is working for DC or Marvel and doesn't understand the basic rules of it's somebody else's toy box, they're going to be disappointed no matter what. There are always times when they go, oh, there's a crossover coming up. It doesn't quite fit in my 6-month outline, but it's okay. You make those allowances, but by and large, especially at Marvel, I got to tell you, they're very good about sort of letting the writer and the artist have their head until such time as the book isn't working anymore or it's not selling, at which point they'll do a creative change. So that's fine. So it's a good pact. I'll continue to give you things that you think you can sell, and you kind of leave me alone, and we'll let it go.
So I'm imagining there's a big difference between your creative-owned properties that you've been working on versus the work for hire. So can you tell us a little bit about Thrillbent, and what I think is interesting is you're a big proponent of digital comics and guided view technology. So could you tell us a little bit about that medium?
Sure. I mean, the impetus from it came from looking at print costs a few years ago and realizing that they were continuing to spiral up and up and up. And I really was taken by the idea of doing material for the iPad, for the iPhone, for the computer screen, where you're using certain techniques and certain methods in storytelling that you can't replicate in print. First and foremost among it was the idea that and this continues to baffle me, that most people think of digital comics as just taking established pages of comics and putting them on the web, or already produced pages of comics. But the problem is that's not digital comics. That's picture. They're selling you pictures of comics, and more to the problem. I mean, the pages are portrait format. They're taller than they are wide, like any book, like any magazine. But look at your computer screen. Look at your iPhone. Look at your iPad. Look at the world around you, because your eyes aren't stacked one on top of each other. So you're looking at the world in a portrait way. The whole world in front of you is landscape format. So creating material specifically for that format was one of our breakthroughs, and that's always been sort of our bellwether, that we want to make sure that that you're not constantly having to scroll up and down, right and left to get the whole picture, to get the whole sense of the comic. It's we're writing for the device. Form follows function.
Mm-hmm. And Thrillbent is your online, I guess, company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Thrillbent.com. Exactly. Yes, a couple of years ago we began. My partner John Rogers, who was a TV producer, and myself began an online comics company where people come and we put material up there every day for free. Brand new serialized material by myself, by other people, by John. Every day there's something new up on Thrillbent, and it's free to read. There's a storefront there that if you want to help support us, if you want to download the stuff and collect it and keep nice PDFs or whatever, then we ask for a small donation. But basically, that's the model. We're trying to get the word out there that this is a valid form of entertainment. This is a really good way of doing comics.
Now, is Guided View a proprietary software? Is that something that Comixology developed?
Right.
Or?
Yeah, Comixology technically owns Guided View, which is basically zooming in on individual panels rather than trying to force someone to read an entire comics page on an iPhone or an iPad screen. And I think it's an interesting work around for older material that wasn't designed for that. But I'd really, in a perfect world, I don't see what we're doing on Thrillbent as Guided View. It's more we're already beginning to do the material directly for the screen. So in other words, if I do my job right, you're not having to do Guided View. You're not having to zoom in and out on specific images, or you're not having to let the camera tell you where you are supposed to look. It's still just a comics page. It's just sideways.
And as I recall, it has prompts where you will touch the screen for the next line of dialogue, and then it'll sort of move the camera. And
Right.
I think I forget the name of the story. It's about a guy, I guess, who's cleaning up after the zombie apocalypse.
Oh,
and,
Luther, yeah.
yes. And I remember reading that. First off, I'm terrified of zombies, so don't judge me. But I just remember watching it. I was thinking it's very cinematic, even though I'm having to engage as a reader. The way the dialogue is popping up, it's a very cinematic feel.
And yet you hit it exactly. You're having to engage as a reader. That's what makes comics a very intimate medium, and what makes comics a unique medium is that you are in control of the pace at which you absorb the story. And this is why I resist soundtracks. This is why I resist voiceovers. This is why I resist limited motion or limited animation, is because all those things are well and good, but they're not comics, because they're imposing an element of time onto the story, and therefore sort of wrenching from your hands the ability to decide at what point you want to turn the page, at what point you want to turn the screen, at what point you want to move on to the next panel.
Right, and as I recall, there was a few moments where the balloon would pop up and there'd be the dialogue, and then you'd hit it again, and then it would lead you to the next thought that the character's having. And what I thought was so fascinating about that is that it lets me decide, is this a fast-paced scene where the action's happening nonstop, or is this one where he's got more time to pause and reflect?
Right. Exactly.
So it makes every reading of that particular story different.
Thank you. And it also benefits certain forms of or certain genres better than others. I mean, it certainly benefits the horror genre greatly, because with a comics page, of course, if you're reading a comic, the only place I can surprise you as a reader is on the upper left-hand corner of a two-page spread as you open the comic. I can surprise you on the page turn, but you're seeing everything else in front of you. With the way we're doing the digital comics, where every swipe of the screen or every tap brings up a new image, that gives us so many more opportunities to surprise you, to twist the narrative, to move the story around, to surprise you.
Mm-hmm. I find it to be just a lot of fun to read comics that way. I also, make sure I keep my comics, handy, so I can always just pick one up and read it whenever I want to. So I would like to ask you a couple of questions about the film The Man of Steel.
Sure. Okay. Happy to.
Now, I think when I think of Man of Steel, I think of the John Byrne reboot from the 1980s, and that was my starting point on Superman. Besides the free giveaways at Radio Shack, when Superman would have to use Tandy technology to stop Lex Luthor.
Oh, TRS-80, Luthor, you were no match for that. Yeah.
But you were the author of Birthright, which was the re-origin or the reimagining of the Superman origin, bringing back the Kryptonian mythology. And a lot of that was featured in Man of Steel, but there were elements that weren't. So I think the one that I read on Twitter was the line about the S standing for hope was something that you had written.
That was a thrill. That was honestly for all my other problems, having that line of dialogue in the movie, which was taken from Birthright, that the S on his planet is a symbol that stands for hope. meant the world to me. That's just to be able to. I mean, put yourself in my shoes. To be able to be your entire life, you've been a fan of this character and a fan of this mythos, and then you're able to put something into it rather than just keep taking out of it. Where you're able to give something back to the character that has some sort of, you know, some sort of impact beyond just the comics page. That felt great.
Yeah, because that was something that was featured in the advertising for the film, and certainly a lot of people were talking about it before it came out. But I think that the biggest problem that I had, and perhaps you as well, is it was a very dark film. And if you're watching at home and you don't want to find out how Man of Steel ends, you might want to tune on something else right now.
Yeah.
But the ending I thought was a lot darker than the hopeful nature that Superman normally has. And do you think that that's the way that we're going to see Superman from now on, or is that just?
My fear is that's how we'll see it. I don't know. I despair sometimes because where I think, again, for all of the good things in the movie, the part that seemed missed to me was that the excuse is always given that, well, you put Superman in an impossible situation where he has to, spoiler alert, take a life or something happens. Here's the thing, it's not a documentary. You didn't have to put him in an impossible situation. That's the writer's edict. And secondly, Superman is built to do impossible things. The first time we saw Superman, and I mean this in 1938, when the world saw him on Action Comics #1 lifting a car over his head, it was an impossible thing. Superman was created by Siegel and Shush to do the impossible. Not only as wish fulfillment for themselves, but also just in the context of the story. Anytime Superman is not doing something impossible in your story, or that the climax is something where he has to do the impossible in order to win, then I don't think it's a Superman story. I think you've missed a bet.
It was. I sat through the film, and I a number of times thought to myself I should just leave, but I said I paid my money for this. I'm going to sit through it till the end. It was, kind of callous. I thought the way Metropolis was ignored.
Although the destruction porn. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, I understand the reasons why they were terrified that people see Superman as a big blue Boy Scout. They were terrified that Superman is old-fashioned. They've got to be hip and cutting edge and dark. But I from my own personal taste, and again, just my opinion, I think they oversold that, and that doesn't speak to me that they have any faith in the character the same way that Marvel does with its cinematic universe, where they put all the faith in those characters, and they're very true to who those characters are, and the success is inarguable.
That's absolutely true. And I think the biggest problem I had with Man of Steel was there's no red shorts. I might be old-fashioned, but it's a classic design. I don't think we need to add piping to it, but I'm just editorializing, I suppose. So I guess the other question I'd like to touch base with, you're known for a very long and celebrated run on The Flash, and a few years back, DC decided to undo what I thought was one of the comic deaths that you don't undo. You shouldn't undo Bucky's death. You shouldn't undo Barry Allen's death, and yet both have been undone.
And yet, exactly, yeah, you should undo Uncle Ben's death. So fingers crossed on that one. But and the sad thing is, though, I mean, the frustrating thing was that there were, and I'm not the first to say this, and this has nothing to do with me. I would say that there were more good Barry Allen stories told in, say, the 10 years after his death, and not by me, but than there were in like 15 years before that. So he served the DC universe quite well as a martyr. He served the DC universe quite well as its sort of first official saint, and it was a unique position for that character. Nobody else at Marvel or DC had a character like that that served us better almost as a in death than in life. So it does not surprise me that DC is particularly good at looking at things that are unique about their characters and paving over those things as fast as they possibly can. So, yeah.
Well, your Flash run, you created an entire mythos based on the sacrifice that Barry Allen made, and by the new adventures of Wally West, so that by the time the New 52 comes out a few years back, you have over 20 years of canon that is just sadly ignored, which made little or no sense to me, but it's not my company to own, I suppose.
No, but but that's exactly, I kind of feel the same way. Look, it's not, I don't want to be angry and bitter about it. It's the way it works. There's every 10, 15 years somebody's going to come along and pave over everything you did, and that's just it doesn't change the trade paperbacks on the shelf. It doesn't change the comics in your collection. You just have to. I admit it stings a little bit sometimes, but that's just my own personal failing. I should just let it go. Things progress.
And we just have a few minutes left of the show right now. I just wanted to find out what work of yours are you most excited about, and what work that you've completed already would you consider to be your favorite?
That's a good question. The last is the easiest. I mean, I'm very fond of Superman Birthright. It's really my chance to tell you the Superman story that I wanted to tell all my life. I'm very fond of my run on Fantastic Four with artist Michael Ringo, because I think that we managed to do classic Marvel without it feeling old-fashioned. I'm quite fond of Kingdom Come. I don't think it's as well written as people seem to think it is. I think that I look back on it and see the sins of a much younger Mark Waid, but that's of the stuff in the oeuvre, that's the stuff that I think stands out. And then the stuff I'm excited about now. I mean, I know it sounds like a cheesy answer, but it's true. It really is whatever I'm working on at the moment, I'm very stoked about. But that said, if I had to choose a favorite, and you're asking me to choose my favorite of like a bunch of different children, probably Daredevil.
Okay. Well, we have just about 1 minute left. I see that you have the classic Neil Allen.
Neil
Adams.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's right. That's right. You fail. That's right.
That's it. I'm just going to hang my head in shame. But you've got Superman against Muhammad Ali, the famous cover there. I did see Neil Adams at a convention this past week, and I just didn't have the cash to get a sketch.
Did you to have any sort of meaningful transaction with him?
No.
He was one of my idols growing up. He was the first artist whose name and work I recognized. But I hope I never get to the point where I feel like I'm having to charge people for signatures at conventions. It just doesn't feel right to me.
Well, I do want to thank you so much, Mark Waid, for joining us on Comic Culture. It's been, I can't believe the half an hour is up already. Already? I know, we're just getting started. But I'd like to thank the audience for watching Comic Culture. And we'll see you again next time with another exciting episode.